Thank you, Lisa, and AIGA. I'm really excited to be here. So, and technically, I should clarify, the bunny is my daughter's, but, but we all get snuggle time with him because he's really, really cool. So, all right. Well, I am doing the presentation today. I believe I have controls at the moment. Yes, so I can move forward. All right. So this is our logo for Athena Project, and our mission in a nutshell is empowering women in the arts. And I like to start with one of my favorite quotes, especially during the time of COVID. This is a quote by Twyla Tharp, and she is a dancer, and art is the only way to run away without leaving home. For so many of us right now, art is a great escape. We can't get enough of it. We're consuming it in high numbers. And for others, people are creating during this time. There's a lot of creating happening because we've had a lot more time and space on our hands than we normally do. Our plan for today is to do an overview of Athena Project. I want to share about why we started in the first place, like what our purpose is, why we exist. I hope to raise awareness about the underrepresentation of women in the arts specifically. I'd love to tell you a little bit about how you can help and things you can pay attention to. And of course, we'll save some time at the end for any questions and any questions that come up. So as I mentioned, our mission is to empower women through the arts. Our vision is that we envision a world with gender equity where women's voices are valued and amplified in the arts. And we value the inherent power in the artistic voices in the artistic voices of women, equity, diversion, and inclusion, equality and opportunities, representation and pay, the creative process, and the power of art to connect to communities. We also define women in a certain way. WOMEN means many things and can be a complicated term. We recognize that the term women does not automatically include all aspects of the gender spectrum, and we want to create a safer space for the expression and growth for all women, trans, and gender nonconforming individuals. We also created an accountability and action statement, mostly because of the need to articulate and commit on paper and publicly to the work that we've been doing behind the scenes for years. This came out of the social justice, racial justice protests that happened this summer. So listen humbly. We want to dig in and get uncomfortable, speak out against injustice, own our own mistakes because we know they will happen, amplify Black and Brown voices, share and support the creatives in our community that lead us to understanding and empathy. We know that this is a journey that we can't do by ourselves. Creating equitable opportunities for women in the arts is something that takes all of us to participate in and to engage in and to learn about. And so if this is your first time understanding that there's inequity in the arts, don't worry, I was there too right before I started the organization. I wanted to give just a sense of our programming because the way that we empower women in the arts is broad and vast. We have artist connection opportunities that will be launching this March. I have talking insert genre because that's not a mistake. That's actually what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking fashion. We're going to be talking theater. We're going to be talking music. We're going to be talking comedy. And each of these conversations will take place over Zoom. And it's a way for us to come together and really listen to our community members as far as what challenges are they facing and how can we support? How can we advocate collectively for the sake of all women artists? And for you designers out there, there's even one about talk and design in the graphic design sense and the visual arts sense that I hope you'll join us for. We're going to kick off March 9th, which is right around International Women's Day, and all information, of course, will be posted to our website. We run a monthly book club where we read plays called Read and Rant. And this is to highlight the underrepresentation of women in the theater arts, specifically playwriting, which I'll share a little bit more about in a bit. But this is a book club format, but we read plays, and sometimes we have guest speakers from the community, depending on the topics that we're talking about, which has been really exciting and another opportunity to learn about our world through theater. This is a picture of one of the Artist Connection opportunities, Artist Night Out, and of course, Read and Rant. We were at Tattered Cover, literally, like, it was the last event that we did. We just launched this in March of last year, and we were at Tattered Cover hosting it. And then, of course, the world shut down, and so we moved to virtual. And fortunately, this format works really well for this program. And so we're excited that it was able to continue on during the pandemic. One of our core programs that have been here from the beginning is our Plays in Progress series. This is the part where we actually read scripts from all over the world written by women playwrights. We put them through a series of panel discussions, we put them through a series of discussions behind the scenes to determine which ones we want to publicly present. And our panel behind the scenes is made up of theater artists and audience members that are passionate about theater. We utilize readers from the community, and we have a scoring system that goes into this, and all of our submissions are read anonymously, so we don't know anything about the playwright while we're determining whether or not we want to actually present it. New play development is something that wasn't happening at the time Athena was started outside of the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. Smaller theater companies weren't as into producing new work. It wasn't quite a thing in Denver just yet, but it shortly and quickly became something that is part of our theater community's fabric. And the development of new work is really important, specifically work by women, to be able to get women's stories on stage and to be able to have our voices heard. So our series is a virtual series, of course. It'll run June 5th and 6th this year. And again, details on the website. And here's a couple of photos from the style of presentation that we've done over the years. These are not fully produced plays. They are readings so that the playwrights can see and hear what the play will look like when it is fully produced. Our final program to share, or excuse me, our almost final program to share with you about is our Curating Art for Impact. This program is about connecting audience to our artists and uplifting artists at the same time as we're uplifting organizations. In this case, we did a program over the summer called Art Finds You, and we presented musicians in pedicabs. We had a mobile stage where we had dancers and comedians and spoken word artists that performed. In this case, in this photo, they performed outside of St. Joe's Hospital. This was Cleo Parker Robinson that we partnered with. It was all about bringing art to the community and uplifting people at a time where we were all confined. The musicians played in the backs of pedicabs. Of course, our very first one, it rained, so that's why everybody's in rain gear at this one. But we had a great time going through the 5 Points neighborhood. And again, just bringing music and joy to people's faces. This event was Art Finds Voters. This was something that we did in partnership with Be Woke Vote. And this was an effort to get out all of the votes that we possibly could for the past election, the 2020 election. So just gives you a flavor of the kinds of things that we do. All of this is about empowering women. And of course, we can't leave out our youth and reaching the next generation, which involves our Girls Create summer camps. This program was started, actually Girls Write was the playwriting program that started our very, very first year of inception in 2012. And it grew to a summer camp program, which we've been running the last 5 years. We do fashion design, where we teach girls how to create their own clothing, or in the case of this summer, we created clothing for dolls because that's what was available. And we also do, we teach young women how to write a play and also stand-up comedy. And we even had our stand-up comedian from the summer, one of them performed in our fall fundraiser. So we really try to incorporate that next generation of voices as we go. And these programs do have scholarships available to them. And again, all details on the website. So I give you that overview so that you see, again, how many different ways that we're focused on empowering women through the arts and opportunities of why we are engaging in this manner with so many different people. However, I want to get to the heart of what we're talking about today, which is why. Why do we have to exist in the first place? Why do we have to call attention to these inequities that exist in many, many professional careers, but especially in the arts? I share another quote with you. There is no greater agony than burying an untold story inside you. This is, of course, by Maya Angelou, famous poet and just wonderful human with very insightful things to say. I draw on her thoughts a lot as my own inspiration. But we all have a story to tell, and we all have our experiences and our perspectives that take us on this journey of life, and art, hopefully you allow it to influence your journey, or in some cases it's just a part of you, like you can't exist without art. And so it is disheartening about how many women are not represented in the various different disciplines. And over the years, since we started in 2012, we've learned about that underrepresentation more and more from specific testimony from people to also, people just sharing with us at different events, as well as data. There's quite a bit of data out there about the lack of women being represented in the arts. And specifically, a statistic that inspired me was a 2009 study that I read by Emily Stans. She was a Harvard Law student, and this was her thesis paper. And she did several different examples of research to be able to justify this underrepresentation. And keep in mind, this was 2009 when the study was done. I read it in about 2011 and I was horrified. I also recognized how naive I was, because I really thought, women's lib and feminist movement and we've arrived. And I really, was believing that things were better. And then when you look at the data and here we are, now 2021, the needle hasn't moved very much. So this particular study highlighted she sent out a play that was written by the same person. It was written by a woman, but in her study, she sent out the script with the male playwright name and a female playwright name. And basically the male version got more results, even though it was the same script. The male version got more positive feedback, even from women artistic directors. And I found that fascinating, that's how that played out in her study. Another statistic from that study was that on Broadway, off Broadway, and in regional theaters, only 17% of all plays produced were written by women in 2014. And again, we did our own studies as Athena Project in 2016 and 2017. We looked at the Rocky Mountain region specifically, so slightly different data sampling point, but 10 years later, we found that we've only moved to about 25%, which is a quarter of all plays that are getting produced are written by women. And that's still not where it should be. You may notice that I'm theater focused. It's both in part that, as Lisa mentioned, my background is in theater. I'm a director, producer, and dramaturg. And also because data and studies have been done more in the movie realm and the theater realm more than other art forms. We keep our eyes out, and we know that there are studies that exist. There are, of course, organizations like Guerrilla Girls that have really highlighted the inequities of women in the visual arts realm, but at the same time, it's just not something that gets a lot of statistical time, if you will, in terms of finding more facts and figures. And yet, from all of that personal testimony that we've had from women over the years, we know it to be true from their firsthand experiences. The irony of all of this is the lack of women's voices on stage doesn't make sense when you look at from a producer angle. Women tend to be the ones who buy tickets. Over 65% of women or 65% of the population are women that buy theater tickets specifically. And so for people that say, women aren't interested, that's just not true, because they're the ones that are buying tickets. Even on AIGA's post, there was a blog post that highlighted that 70% of women are graduates of a design program, but only 11% end up being creative directors. And I have this link included here to highlight it, but I also have a link at the end of the presentation, which you'll all get a copy of, that has the references of the articles that I'm referring to along the way. And this study was really, really also telling in that women are interested in design and interested in the arts, but something happens on their journey to being selected in leadership. And especially if you're a woman of color, the women of color realm of women in leadership is just even significantly less. I think on the theater side, artistic directors, it was like 0.5%. So not even a full percent of women in the theater realm are leaders of institutions. Why is that? Why are we underrepresented? I offer these as just some ideas, food for thought, and again, as a way to get you thinking about these inequities, about women in the arts, and hopefully what can we do about it together? Because as mentioned, it takes a community effort to continue to create change in this realm. I don't know if many of you have heard about, there's an implicit bias study that Harvard did, and I listed it as implicit bias is real, because we all have our own experiences that inform who we connect with, who we hang out with, who we spend time with, who's in our circle. And I encourage you to take this test and actually identify for yourself those biases. They are in us, they're subconscious, and they inform everything that we do. So that is also something that leads to underrepresentation when you're thinking about if male artistic leadership are the ones driving institutions and they have their male dominated peer circle, then those are the people that they're going to draw from when positions are open or when leadership positions are open. Even though usually just below that in the admin capacity or in the project management capacity, it's filled with women who deserve an opportunity to lead these organizations. Lack of representation is also cyclical. We don't see it. It's not necessarily something that we pay attention to unless your head is in an awareness space of, oh, right, when I'm looking at a list of artists that are going to be, appearing at the museum, for example, are we aware whether or not the list of artist names are women? Are their headshots women? Are they women of color? We have to kind of keep our eyes open for it, but because it's not something that happens automatically, I don't think we are aware of it enough, and therefore we don't advocate for ourselves very much. Men walk into a job and they basically ask for the salaries that they deserve. They apply for positions that they are 80% qualified for, and women don't. Women tend to have, in some ways, a more realistic approach about what we're able to achieve in terms of like we're trying to make sure that we are honest and we're trying to make sure that we're authentic about our representation. And yet it's something that continues to perpetuate the cycle of underrepresentation. If we don't ask for it, then we don't get it. And then, of course, in many cases, even when we do ask for it, we don't get it because of some of these other things. It's not just one thing that's causing the underrepresentation of women in the arts. It's multiple things. And referring to what I just shared, that story about salaries are traditionally being paid based on past history. So if you got a stipend or a commission to do an art piece that was for $1,000, then chances are in your next commission, you're going to ask for $1,000 because it's a different organization. You're not going to leverage, well, I did this commission for $1,000 and now I'm going to go for $2,000 in the same way. And then of course the institutions that are hiring you contribute to this because they're also looking at your past salary because they also want to know how much do they need to pay you. So again, it's another example of how underrepresentation that happens. Please know that I know I'm making generalizations at this moment in time, but I do recognize that every institution is different, every individual is different, and again, this all works together. So I'm not picking on anybody specifically, at least not on this conversation, because there are some that do it better than others, but collectively and as a society, these are things that we have to be aware of in order to continue to draw attention to this and make this change. Other things that come up under underrepresentation, particularly for women, called the baby factor. Women leave their careers sometimes or put a pause in their careers to be able to have children. And in doing that, it also ends up putting them behind. Obviously, a good choice to focus on caretaking of children. However, it leaves challenges and gaps in their pursuing their professional career, especially in something like the arts, where it's already hard work to get ahead. It's already difficult to make a living as an artist because art as itself is not something that is fully appreciated in our United States society and culture. Other things that we've heard, artistic directors will say, I don't know where to find women artists. You want me to hire women or women of color? Well, I don't know where to find them. And they put it out there as an excuse as to why we're not working with women or we're not hiring women. There's a great story that came out of an artistic director who did just that on a panel discussion, and women across the country in the theater realm answered this question. There is an organization called the Kilroys that's all volunteer driven, and they put out a list every year that is focused on plays written by women and women of color and women of all genders, and it's wonderful. And it was, there's over 300 plays on there, and it was an answer to that particular artistic director who was like, we don't know where to find people. They went, here you go, here's the resource. The other thing that happens is a lot of times there's only one opportunity in leadership for possibly a woman artist. We've come some ways from affirmative action, but not far enough away from affirmative action in that if there's only one spot that's available and it goes to a woman, then that woman has a challenge in bringing somebody else up with her. It's a door open, but it's not necessarily, when you start putting people into boxes and when you start putting artists into boxes and making representation happen by just that one individual, you're not going to actually create change from an institutional level nor in a community level. Again, it takes more of us to create awareness around this and actually make a difference. Women are disproportionately expected to take on traditional household duties as well as a full-time job. And because we aren't paid the same in the first place, it perpetuates the cycle of not being cost effective for the men in the household to leave the workforce. Obviously, thanks to COVID, things for women have been more and more challenging and difficult. Women are bearing the brunt of not only having to keep income coming in, take care of the household, become a homeschool teacher on the spot, and then, if they're lucky, try to find some time to create or try to find some time to pursue their independent career of making it as an artist. And this cycle is, again, not to blame men, but just the reality of how we as a society continue to perpetuate this. If men are always getting the opportunities and they're always getting promoted and they're always making more money, then this cycle isn't going to change. When it comes to a pandemic and we have to choose between putting food on the table because we have a partner that makes more money than we do, or staying home and taking care of the kids, obviously the partner who's making the most money is moving forward, and that traditionally has been men. I did find a couple of statistics around this specifically. There's many articles that I also included in my reference, but before the pandemic, women did nearly 3 times as much work, unpaid care and domestic work, as men. Since the pandemic, we have school closures and healthcare systems that we're trying to also do caretaking of. And I know you all are feeling that crunch as much as I have. And I'm very lucky and very privileged in that my partner does make more money than I do. But yet I personally have experienced this dynamic where my art, which is Athena Project, and the growth of Athena Project has had to take a back burner because of the other duties that have been put upon me in the household. And again, I know I'm really lucky in being able to have this dynamic in our household, but so many women are suffering in trying to just survive, let alone find a way to create. This statistic also highlights the top workforces that are held by women of color. It's really interesting to notice when you start looking at different data points, unless you're talking about art specifically, so unless you're looking at like Americans for the Arts site, or you're reading an article about arts in terms of jobs in the arts doesn't show up on most other data point reference pieces of information, if you will. Not that this sheet was targeted at that, but I find that interesting that, again, our value as a society in what arts means to us is so low on the bottom rung of the ladder. This also was a slide that was just pointing to all of these people are women of color, and the jobs that they hold definitely puts them in the front lines of other exposure to people, which contributes to why we're seeing COVID numbers so high for women of color in particular. Why do we want gender equality? Why do we want equity? Well, as I mentioned earlier, women hold the stories of our communities. Without them being told, they are forgotten or deemed non-important. Oral history in particular is something that is passed down from generation after generation. And if we're not getting these stories out there, then they are not getting the platform that they deserve. And then we're not reflecting our history as accurately, our collective history as accurately as we need to. Young people need to see it to believe it. Young women, young girls need to see women and women of color in leadership roles to show that it is possible. Representation matters, and it's hard to believe that it can be achieved if you don't see it, which will continue to perpetuate the cycle that we're in. When we uplift people that are impacted the most by hardship and inequities, all of us benefit. It's not like it's a bad thing to have more women artists in the museum so that more women artists will go to the museum. It's good for business. It's good for our society as well. Excuse me for the background noise. And so all of us will benefit. And then, of course, diversity of thought equals diversity of impact. The more voices that we have at the table, the more voices that we have on stage, the more that we are listening to artists, that we're creating empathy for one another as humans, the bigger our impact can be, the better our world can be, the more that we can make a difference together. Speaking of making a difference, how can you make a difference? I am a big believer in action, and I know that I get overwhelmed when I think about all the work that needs to be done for this to change. And so what helps me is to focus on the little things, focus on what you consume as one of them. Pay attention to where you go. Are you seeing a play written by a woman? Are you seeing a piece of art that has been created by a woman? Is it public art that's created by a woman? It's truly step one is to open your eyes to what art you consume. And if you are in a position of leadership, and if you are able to hire someone or commission someone, please make sure that you're also putting intentionality about hiring women. Check your bias, make sure that you're not looking at just your inner circle, but really truly think about who's not here that needs to be here. It takes work and it takes relationship building to connect with people of color and people in the trans community and people of all abilities. Like, we have to do that work in order to make sure that all voices are being represented. This is a favorite. Call it out when you see inequity. Social media, for the love-hate relationship that I have with it, it is a megaphone, and it is become more and more acceptable. And even if it isn't acceptable, we should be doing it, because this is how we create attention and awareness to these inequities. Look at a theater season and look at, are they producing a woman or not? And if they're not, then ask why. Call the managing director, call the artistic director, send an email, call it out. Look at the exhibits that are coming into the museum. Look at the galleries. Even smaller arts organizations have the ability to make it a priority to hire women and women of color in their art. And so if you see it, call it out. In the same way, call out the positive, call out the organizations that are doing a great job. That same organization I mentioned, the Kilroys, they sent cakes to theater companies across the country, like personal delivered cakes to every theater that had a 50-50 equitable season. It was a great positive way to call out good work that's being done, as well as highlight the work that still needs to be done. And it matters, it matters, it matters. Spread the word about your most favorite woman artist. As speaking on behalf of all of the artists that I know, that is the hardest thing, is to help them grow their business. It's helping them break in to an institution, helping them get their products sold out into the marketplace. When you're an artist and you're trying to create, which takes hours upon hours upon hours, and then you're also trying to run a business of that art, it is so much time. And it's all the stuff that happens behind the scenes that it just is difficult and challenging. And so something that's easy that you can do is think about who are the women artists that you know in your circle, and how do you amplify their voices? How do you get them out to your circle and encourage your circle to do the same, so that they grow a business? The joke is telephone and tell a woman, right? We all find products that we love, and that the first thing we do is share with our friends about it. Why can't we do that with art as well? As mentioned, there is our website, and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the things. I'd love personally to hear from you directly, and I know we're going to move into some questions and answers. And of course, here's all the references. This will be passed out to you. But I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time this morning. And I know I would love to hear from the audience. So thank you so much for listening to me blabber. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this issue, and there's so much work to be done, and we need your help to do it. So I hope you will join me in this effort to change the dynamics of our society and truly create a more equitable society.
Thank you so much, Angela. Guys, just so you know, if you have questions, you can write them in the Q&A, and we're gonna go over them in a few. The event of today is recorded as the previous one. So later you're gonna receive a recap email with the link, these presentations, and the contact. So if you wanna follow up with Angela directly, you can do that later. I have a first question for you while our people are typing them out. So first of all, this was really interesting, and I have a more deep understanding of what you guys are doing. It's very inspiring. One of the things you said at the end, the small action we can do is call it out. And I think that is it's very easy to say, but hard to do. And you made me think of a friend of mine that she's in the music industry actually, and all the employees are women, and they had issues with the boss. And during pandemic, they got laid off, people didn't get paid. And the main concern is that some of them were trying to talk to the boss, who was not super friendly. And some people quit and didn't get the money they deserve, either they did the job. And the issue was that it's a very man-dominating field, and is a niche. And their point of view was like, well, I'm a woman, and if I go against my boss, he knows a lot of people is gonna cut me out from all other jobs. So how can people call it out in cases like this where they want, but it's hard to do?
Yeah.
What's the point of view?
No, it's a great question, and it's unfortunately something that continues to happen, and often because of that fear of reputation being damaged, or people don't want to work with you, that also tends to keep women silenced. A couple of things that I will share, and this is by no means an answer, because there isn't just one. It is part of the system, and the dynamics the power dynamics specifically that exist in the art form, that we're passionate about making a difference and making change. I've worked with an entity called Rocky Mountain Safety Alliance. I actually was a founding member, and it came out of sexual harassment and sexual assault allegations being made in the theater community specifically. The whole project came out of actually Chicago, which used Facebook to call out sexual assault allegations that were happening underground at one particular theater company. Their movement was called Not in Our House. That's a hashtag, so you can look that up. And what they did was they banded together and they created a document as a way to help with the power dynamics, so that this document listed out standards and agreements, if you will, that people in positions of power would agree to abide by with people not in positions of power. And they put it to a test of 10 different theater companies to abide by these standards and to work through the kinks, to be able to create a more equitable space for those power dynamics not to get in the way. It's something that Athena Project is moving toward in our advocacy arm. It is something that is needed in all of the disciplines. And please know that, a document isn't going to just fix the problems that are happening in the exact dynamics that you described, but giving power back to people to be able to hold each other accountable, to be able to have a reference point of, you agreed to abide by this and you're not. I mean, this is where unions come into play. This is why unions exist, to be able to hold people in power accountable. At different levels of, in different artists' careers, we all run into these power dynamics, and we all have to end up making that choice of, is it something that we want to sacrifice to stay in those disproportionate power dynamics in order to get ahead? Or do we want to band together with other women and work for women who understand those power dynamics and create a better outcome in the future? Obviously, I'm a belief of the latter, but I recognize that it's my privilege that gives me the opportunity to do that. And that decision becomes individual for everybody who's going through it. I think our job collectively is to call it out and look at that movement that happened in Chicago as inspiration, which we did. And that movement is happening in Colorado in the theater realm, but there's so much work to be done with comedy, with visual artists, with the fashion design community. It is all men. It's permeated with men in these leadership positions. And we're not going to just wave a magic wand and change that. They're not going to just be able to not do that anymore because we're calling it out. But as we saw with the Me Too movement, as we saw with, calling it out with numbers, starts to make a difference, starts to put a dent in it. And that's what we got to keep doing. We've got to keep after it. And I find that if we're doing it together, there's safety in those numbers, and we will be able to continue to enforce change. It's a long, long process, unfortunately, so long.
Another thought I had, I'm not sure if I told you, but I'm originally from Italy, and so it's a very different culture. And I feel in my country, in the good and the bad, we are very direct. And we are very passionate about anything, but we can be more honest without people take it personal. And one of my main challenge here in the US is that people are very sensitive. So sometimes I feel I cannot be direct. And for me, I'm not saying things loud because I want to be right. I don't care about being right. Like, if I do, it's because I care about something. And it's more important for me to have this difficult conversation, have a confrontation, and hear a different point of view, so that I can also understand but not always picking up is easy in this country, because you might say something, another person just doesn't get the big picture and they just attack a single word. Oh, you said this, or you said that. So it become, I'm like, can we focus on the big picture, not on the detail? And this is something I feel is very women-like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think if you maybe have suggestion in those cases so that we can be stronger as a women, as a group, without people taking personal.
Yeah, sensitive is a good word, and I completely understand, Lisa, that focus on one thing, and you're like, you're not you're not actually hearing the statement that I'm trying to make. So it is something that I think we need more training in conflict resolution. I think that we need to understand how to have critical conversations with people so that we are desensitized. It's constructive conversations, I should say. Like, it's something that we even pride ourselves on when we're working on feedback with a playwright. Like, we are walking those lines of wanting to make sure that the playwright can hear the feedback that we're giving, but also respect the work that they're doing. And there is a way to do both. But it takes practice, and we don't often have opportunities to practice it unless we're like thrown into it in the moment. There's definitely theater in particular, and part of why I love theater as an art form, has a way to utilize role playing to be able to connect with people and have them practice, have them be able to be in a scenario, create the scene where that exact situation happens, and then really practice. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? How are you going to hear it? And practice listening to each other so that we get better at that. But the reason why I started with conflict resolution is it's just something that, because when we're in it and our emotions are as high as they are, we get focused on the nitpicky and we do miss out on the big details. And so maybe the person to practice that conflict management with is a man. I know my husband and I have a lot of conversations around his directness and my like not getting to the point fast enough because I'm paying attention to the emotion of it. And they're difficult because it's a very intimate personal relationship. So trying to do that and practice with the emotions is just something that it's a challenge, and yet we all need it. So I will put that on Athena's board to be thinking about. Maybe we can offer some conflict resolution training under our umbrella with a specific focus on the arts, because I think it would be helpful to address what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking a lot with you right now, but I think maybe that can be the theme of some events.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
feeling like, oh, what's the next event? Actually, that can be an interesting topic because it's not something we usually talk about.
Correct.
And actually can be very constructive.
Right. It's a skill set. Well, and I say there are pay negotiations. There are webinars on how to negotiate pay that are happening both for artists specifically. So I look to the business community a lot on a lot of the trainings that they're doing, because they're relevant and they're skills that impact the arts. I wish the business community looked stronger to us for how to use art to create empathy. So.
Yeah. I'm making notes, sorry, while you're talking.
No worries. No worries.
Some like topic for like our future event. I was like, oh, that's a very interesting conversation.
Right.
Guys, if anyone actually would like share a story or has some example, we can allow you to talk so that you can give your point of view, and if you feel about it, just we want to hear your voice and your stories, and think about this as an opportunity to share your struggle and have a constructive conversation if you want. Or if you don't want to share it, but you want to contact us or Angela in private, we're also very happy to talk to you. One more thing, just so you know, all our events are volunteer-based, so they are free, but we ask for donation in those, for today's event. All the donation, if you have done it, like 50% of the donation are gonna go to the Athena's project. If you didn't, but you wanna still make a contribution, you can go on her website directly and donate to them. And we always appreciate your support. And we don't do this for the money, we do this out of passion. For us, collaborating with other groups in Colorado specifically is very rewarding. I don't have any other questions so far. At least anyone wanna talk? Is 8:50? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was curious if anybody wanted to share if they are aware of the art that they're consuming, like if they are, you know, making sure that they're seeing works created by women.
I mean, for me personally, it depends on which field we are talking about, because many times, at least you start going and check details, you see just a piece, and it's very hard to understand if it's a man or a woman. At least maybe it's a painting that you have to read the description and like, you know, who has done it. Either like graphic design, like at least it's a portfolio, you know, but if you see generic art, is not always so clear. But as you mentioned before, it's about like pay attention. Maybe this is something we can like focus more and try to do. There are actually a lot of groups I saw around, or like women focus, or like business and art. So that's are very supportive. So there is a big one here in Colorado where it's just women based, and it's very nice to have like feedback and support from the community. But if you have other suggestions, let us know. We are happy to share your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think that just made me think of going back to social media a little bit. Like we try to any photos that are being taken on behalf of the organization, we actually save them in our files under the photographer's name, so that when we go back to use them for social media, or when other people go to use them, that the photographer is getting credit at the same time. And we've tried to do that with our designers as well. When we've had multiple designers, we've been fortunate enough to have just one or two people that work for us. And so of course their name's on the website, and we're not crediting every single design that they do. But I do think that's something that, especially with social media, there's no reason not to call out the name of the artist that created something in the blurb that you're posting, with the exception of Twitter, which, you know, has some limitations of the text, but you know, add it in. Add it in later, or again, make it a priority to call out art by women when you see it.
Okay. Angela, I think our time is at the end, but I want to thank you again for your time, your help, your presentation. We have been talking for the last 2 months, so we are very happy that finally we make this happen. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the event. You're gonna get a follow-up email later. And if you have any further questions, feel free to contact Angela directly, or you can write to AIGA. We're also looking for more volunteers to join our board. We are open to any culture, the more the merrier. So if anyone is interested in collaborating with us, and it's not just about be a designer, you can like be a copywriter or do marketing or whatever is your business. We are open to hear different voices. So if anyone is interested to join us, feel free to send me an email or to AIGA, and we will follow up with you. And thank you again, Angela, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Sam. You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.